The Sony NEX-7 was released in 2011 and was Sony's first attempt to target higher-end professional users in the mirrorless camera world. It's been interesting testing out this camera the last month, especially as I compare it to the Sony NEX-6 and the Sony a6000, but that will be a different video where I compare those cameras. This video will specifically focus on the pros and the cons of using the NEX-7 in 2023. Let's just dive right into the positives of the NEX-7, starting with this is one of two NEX cameras that features a really nice viewfinder. This is a really high quality, high resolution viewfinder that actually is pretty solid for taking images and even recording video through the viewfinder. The only other NEX camera that features a viewfinder is the Sony NEX-6, which actually was released many years after the NEX-7. I love having a viewfinder. As they beefed up the body of this camera, they were able to squeeze in a viewfinder that is actually pretty solid, and you can add a couple of eye accessories to make it a more pleasant experience as well, but I don't have any eye accessories on my version right here. The NEX-7 also features a new 24.3 megapixel sensor that we didn't see in any of the other NEX line series of cameras. Most of the NEX cameras have a 16.1 megapixel sensor. They've just sort of moved that sensor from body to body as they updated. Now they had some better processing and better image quality in some variations, but it was usually the same sensor from body to body. In the NEX-7, we see a 24.3 megapixel sensor, which I think is actually a different sensor than the a6000, but it's the same resolution. Overall, this sensor's performance is pretty solid as far as image quality is concerned. You can see the photos I took here on the screen behind the scenes at a video production shoot that I was directing are all pretty solid. This camera has pretty good autofocus in most circumstances. Lower light, it tends to hunt a little bit more for photos, but I was overall impressed with the performance of the NEX-7 as it is a much older camera, 2011, but I actually enjoyed using it. This is also a shared sensor of the Sony a77, which is like Sony's DSLR style camera that was released in the early 2010s as well. And honestly, this sensor holds up pretty well as far as image quality is concerned, even in 2023. On this camera, you get two dials on top of the camera to change your shutter speed or your aperture, and I think you can map your ISO to one of the dials as well. This is a very interesting body design. I honestly haven't seen many cameras with this double like thumb wheel feature where you can change settings with two different dials on the top of the camera. I don't see it often, and you definitely don't see it in the Sony cameras very often. It's definitely an interesting design, but not one that I particularly prefer in my shooting style. I tend to like the front dial where I can control that with my index finger on the front of the camera. I'm not a huge fan of this weird two dials to control with my thumb. It is nice to have, but definitely not something that's like I'm hoping more Sony cameras in the future have this two dial system. It's not my preference. With the NEX-7, you definitely get a better grip than you get with pretty much any other NEX camera besides the NEX-6. Both the NEX-6 and 7 feature this much nicer, fatter grip that's just easier to get a hold of with your fingers. Now, the a6000 line basically all have this same style grip. So the a6000, a60 300, 500, a6100, all of those have a very similar style grip besides the Sony a6600 and now a6700. Naming a lot of cameras, sorry. It's a lot to keep track of. But yeah, this grip it's nice. It's beefier compared to the other NEX lines, but again, it's a pretty small grip comparative to the A7 series of cameras, which all have a little bit of a better grip than this guy. As far as the rest of the body features, it's very similar to the Sony a6000 as far as ergonomics and shooting experience as far as choosing dials and using the button layout on the camera. In short, basically in every possible way, the NEX-7 is a better ergonomic experience than every other NEX camera. It definitely more feels like you're using a camera out of the a6000 series than the NEX series. And frankly, the NEX-7 is what gave us the framework for the a6000 line to begin with. Before we go any further, be sure to leave a like on this video. It really helps boost this in the algorithm to help reach more people who are interested in these types of camera reviews, especially in the Sony ecosystem. So feel free, leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much, guys. Okay, we're gonna shift our attention to the cons of the NEX-7, which actually was a longer list than I was hoping to make for the NEX-7, specifically starting with the price point, okay? In 2023, it's very hard to find an NEX-7 for under $300. I spent quite a long time, over a month, trying to find this camera under $300. I ended up picking up for $299. I constantly saw them 380, 405, 400, and that's just a pretty high price point for such an old piece of technology. This camera is 12 years old. That's a really old camera to be paying $400 for, when you can pretty reliably pick up an A6000 between $400 to $500, which is not a significant increase to what the NEX-7s are going for typically. I've even seen some A6000s closer to the $300 price point. And I would pretty much always prefer the A6000 over the NEX-7 in most regards. So right there, the price, the fact that the NEX-7 has held its value so well is both a pro and a con. If you have an NEX-7, that could be good for you to be able to hold on to that camera and sell it if you want to reinvest that money into a different system, a different body, a different lens, etc. But if you're trying to enter into the Sony market and you're wanting to go for a budget option, I think there's a few better options in the budget range, sub $300 than the NEX-7. And then if you just increase your budget a tiny bit, you can go up to the A6000. So the NEX-7 right now, in 2023 at least, is placed in a weird price point where it's hard for me to justify in my mind recommending someone go spend $300, $350, $400 on an NEX-7 when there are just some other options in that range that I think are a better fit for people. Next is again both a pro and a con, which is this camera is the only NEX camera that has a headphone jack. So you can put an external microphone into this camera and record audio. The problem is I cannot find a way to do any sort of manual gain adjustment on the camera. So I can't set my audio levels. It basically defeats the whole purpose of having this microphone to begin with, because I don't like the camera automatically setting the gain up or down depending on the volume. It creates for a weird dynamic experience. So I'm not a big fan of even putting a mic into this camera to begin with. I don't think it's a very reliable way to get clean, reliable audio. So I would still record dual system to an external recorder if I was using the NEX-7. With the NEX-7, again, here's a pro and a con, which is you get a hot shoe, but it's specifically designed for alpha accessories. So it's called I think it's called a Sony Alpha hot shoe, okay? Designed for certain accessories, and you can't just plug any sort of microphone into the slot. You can't put a light into the slot. It has to be specific to this NEX Alpha series hot shoe system, which I'm not in love with. I don't have anything that works with this type of hot shoe platform. So this hot shoe is basically unusable to me in 2023. Another con is you just get all of the old technology associated with the NEX line. So the old menu system, the old autofocus system, which just is pretty outdated. And so if you're going to spend $300 to $400 to find an NEX-7, I'd recommend taking a look at the A6000, the Sony A5000, the A5100. These are going to be in similar price points, or even the Sony NEX-6, which we'll talk about in another video. But these are other options that could be a little bit cheaper even, or just a better option as far as autofocus performance and video codecs. So this has been an interesting camera to use because in so many ways I want to love the NEX-7, but as I compare it to the NEX-6 or the NEX-5R, I really think those two cameras might be better options in 2023 because of what price point they come in and what kind of value you get at that price point. I have a whole video on my channel about how to buy cameras on eBay, but if you want to take a look at the NEX-7, you can filter by sold items and completed items, and that allows you to see what this camera is actually selling for. So you can see most of them are in the $300 price point or so, a little bit more than 300, some in the 400 range. You'll rarely find one sub $300 that doesn't have significant problems, okay? The NEX-5R and the NEX-6 have about 75 to 80% of the functionality of the NEX-7, but come at a significantly lower price point, okay? You're gonna be able to reliably pick up those two cameras sub $200, sub $150 even, and it's difficult to find this one for below $300. I didn't really want this review to be a big bash session on the NEX-7 because it has a lot going for it. But me personally, as I've purchased a ton of these NEX cameras in the last few months to be able to put out these YouTube videos for my YouTube channel, I've just realized it just might not be the best fit for most people in 2023. And I'm probably going to sadly steer you away a different direction in the NEX line. I had a lot of hope for this camera. I thought it was gonna be the one, it was gonna be the best, the pinnacle of NEX series cameras. But personally, I just have a hard time recommending it to my audience, okay? But if you've used this camera, please let me know in the comments. If this is one that your beloved Sony NEX-7, wonderful. Let me know in the comments about what your experience has been, what the pros and the cons. If you know a way to manually set your audio levels, let me know in the comments. But as of right now, I have a hard time recommending this to you, my YouTube listener. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and comment down below. Also, I have more videos on my channel about NEX series cameras, and I have lots more coming. Okay, we're gonna do reviews, NEX-7 versus NEX-6, a full NEX-6 review. We're gonna review the NEX-6 and 7 and A6000 together. We're gonna look at the A5100. We're gonna do a lot of camera reviews on this channel. This is just the tip of the iceberg, so stick around. We're gonna do a ton of camera reviews. If you like what we're doing here, feel free to support what we're doing by leaving a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much, guys. Much love.